Do you remember this conversation with James Vega from Mass Effect 3?
Died. With most of my squad. Protecting a civilian colony from a collector attack.
And the colony?
It was either them, or the intel we had on the collectors. Intel we could have used to destroy them. I chose the intel.
Sorry. That's a tough call.
James reveals only a bit more about this tough assignment, but there is a lot more to it. If you are ever curious to know the whole story, you'll find it in the animated film Mass Effect Paragon Lost. In this video, I'll tell you a bit about the movie and then give recommendations on whether or not it's worth watching. For your convenience, this video is divided into chapters. The review section will contain spoilers for Paragon Lost, as well as some light spoilers for the Mass Effect trilogy, so watch with caution. Mass Effect Paragon Lost is an animated action film directed by Atsushi Takeuchi and written by Henry Gilroy. The movie is set around the time of Mass Effect 2 and sets up the character arc for James Vega in Mass Effect 3. Paragon Lost tells the story of James Vega leading a small squadron of Alliance Marines as they defend the colony of Fel Prime from a collector attack. Outnumbered and outgunned, James and his team engage in a tense battle that forces him to make tough decisions that test whether or not he's the hero he wants to be. Overall, I'd say Paragon Lost is an okay movie. Despite some bumps in the road, it's still an enjoyable ride from start to finish. I can sympathize with how the anime style can be a barrier for some viewers, but I think you'll feel rewarded for pushing past this. However, this movie is understandably not going to be everyone's cup of tea. With that in mind, here are a few recommendations and considerations for folks who may be interested in the movie. First and foremost, Paragon Lost is a movie primarily about James Vega, and this is also one of its best attributes. Being present in only one game, James gets such little time with the player, so stories like this and his comic runs go a long way to endear him to the audience. Paragon Lost, in particular, is a critical part of James's backstory, so I strongly recommend this movie to those who are about to begin a Mass Effect 3 playthrough, or to those who are generally fans of the character. In my opinion, Paragon Lost is best watched after beating Mass Effect 2 since it has some heavy plot spoilers for that game. Additionally, I strongly recommend reading the comic Mass Effect Conviction immediately after watching Paragon Lost. This can be a bit jarring because the moments where the film leaves off and the comic begins have somewhat conflicting tones. However, it provides a really cool experience in the long run, since Conviction is an epilogue of sorts to the movie, and it cleverly leads into Mass Effect 3. Let's first address the most apparent oddity of Paragon Lost. Yes, the animation does look a bit weird at times. When I imagine stories in the Mass Effect universe, my brain pictures the visual style of the games, and I'm sure nearly everyone else does as well. If the visuals of the franchise were on a tiered list, the next one down for me would be the comics, particularly as drawn in stories like Redemption, Evolution, and Invasion. I would place Paragon Lost on the bottom tier. All this is to say, seeing the Mass Effect universe in the art style of Paragon Lost was kind of tough for me. It works well enough for the story this movie is telling, but I don't think it suits the general vibe of Mass Effect very well. Once you get past the animation, it becomes easier to see the greatness within the film. Paragon Lost is a pretty good Mass Effect story. It's basically a short-form version of one of the games. A military hero leads the fight against a powerful alien threat, making critical choices along the way that shape the outcome of the adventure. Not everyone survives the mission, but the hero does, and then they must live with the consequences of their actions. This is every Mass Effect game in a nutshell, and it's demonstrated remarkably well in Paragon Lost. The best aspect of the film by far is James Vega as the protagonist. Freddie Prinze Jr.'s performance as James is fantastic, the best in the movie. As I mentioned in my review of the comic series Mass Effect Homeworlds, James unfortunately suffers from only being in one game, so any additional stories with the character provide more opportunity to flesh out his backstory and give fans more time to spend with him. James is the heart and soul of Paragon Lost, and the movie adds so much depth to his character. He mentions the film's events in conversations throughout Mass Effect 3, but seeing them as they happened allows players to become closer to the character, which has a remarkably positive effect on his portrayal in the game. James endures many harrowing experiences fighting off the Collector attack on Fel Prime, and he's pushed to take drastic measures to survive. Forcing James to make a choice between saving the colonists and saving Tria and the Data at the end of the film is brilliant. These are the choices that demonstrate who a character really is, and I'm so glad James was able to receive this kind of attention, because it definitely makes his character much more enjoyable when replaying Mass Effect 3. What impressed me even more is that the film allowed its hero to make the least heroic choice in the final hour. Choosing to save Tria and the Data is an excellent subversion of the military hero character archetype, who, in every other story, somehow always makes the right call. If you played Mass Effect 3 before seeing the film, you probably knew this would happen, but seeing it play out and the difficulty that went into making that decision is stunning. I appreciate this a lot. It gives so much context to James as a character, and offers a different perspective on his feelings about Shepard in Mass Effect 3. Unfortunately, some weaker parts of Paragon Lost bear mentioning. The biggest bump for me was the cast of characters around James. The rest of his squad is kind of annoying. Each one is essentially a stereotypical Alliance grunt or Marine jarhead. Their personalities and appearances aren't enough to make them stand out from one another. This lack of personality proves to be a critical flaw in the story. I don't really feel too much sadness or shock when these characters get hurt or die. Each time it happened, I found myself thinking, oh well, what's next? If these moments were executed well, they would not only have more impact on the audience, but also allow for more emotional stakes for the other characters. Instead, these moments are just too shallow to actually matter. Of all the side characters, Tria is the most interesting. Obviously, the filmmakers want the audience, and James, to fall in love with the character, which is pretty easy to do, especially when they set her up as a timid underdog character who wants to face her fears. She has a somewhat compelling character arc that ties into James quite well. The Collectors are pretty good villains in Paragon Lost. They are just like their counterparts in Mass Effect 2, and are even scarier in many ways. Although I find it a bit weird that this movie essentially spoils the big reveals of Mass Effect 2, this being that the Collectors are modified Protheans trying to make a human Reaper. On the one hand, it adds considerable value to the Data that James chooses to save at the end of the story. Still, I feel like something else of importance could have been substituted for this detail, something that doesn't spoil or have anything to do with the critical moment from the games. The final point I want to discuss is the cameos in Paragon Lost, which are all just too inconsistent to be exciting. The movie features cameos from Admiral Anderson, Admiral Hackett, and Liara T'Soni. For starters, all of these appearances would have been much better if they had featured the original voice actors for the characters. Using different actors just weakens the credibility of this film, and loses goodwill that could have been easily gained from the audience. The Liara cameo in particular was pretty weird. She seems very open when speaking about the Reapers, and totally unaware of how she sounds to people who are probably just hearing about them for the first time. I feel like Liara should know better. It's also weird that Liara and James briefly met before the events of Mass Effect 3, yet neither of them commented on this fact in-game. The simple explanation for this is that Paragon Lost was released after the game, so the writers of Mass Effect 3 probably didn't foresee this small interaction, and I doubt there was a high level of collaboration between the game writers and the film team. There are a handful of other plot holes and lore inaccuracies in the film, but they aren't big enough to ruin the experience, so they were easy enough for me to ignore. Thanks for watching. If you end up checking out Paragon Lost, please leave a comment to let me know what you think, and be sure to put appropriate spoiler warnings for your discussion. If you have any questions about the story or characters, please also feel free to comment below, and I'll try to answer them or get around to them in a future video. If you liked this video, be on the lookout for my coverage of the other Mass Effect tie-ins like the novels and comic books. I also have several theory videos coming, so stay tuned. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.